September 14th, and we would like to welcome you to today's Redevelopment Agency board meeting. And to help reduce the transmission of COVID-19, we have returned to holding our meetings virtually. This return to online meetings follows an increase in COVID-19 cases and updated mask requirements. We're closely monitoring the situation, and the RDA board will return with hybrid or in-person meetings when appropriate and safer for the public and city employees. We start our RDA meetings with comments to the board. Your feedback is always welcomed. You can share that with the board anytime by mailing the council office at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114-5476, or emailing us at council.comments@socgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. We are accepting your comments through WebEx. And for those whose only option is to call in, staff will be monitoring a separate telephone line. I want to mention our rules of the quorum. These are guidelines to help our meeting progress in an orderly, civil, efficient way. We will move through the agenda and want to give everyone the opportunity to voice their opinions without feeling intimidated. In order to achieve this, our rules of the quorum begin from the moment you arrive into our virtual meeting. The RDA board respects all points of view and we welcome new insights. Please be respectful. Avoid yelling, profanity, or making racial slurs, obscene, or defamatory remarks. If you use profanity during your comment, your line will be muted. If any comments that reach a level of disrespect, I will ask that you be muted and you will forfeit your opportunity to address the board today. If you're not able to complete your comments this afternoon, you're welcome to email the board or call our comment line. In addition, our staff will request for your name during the registration process. To limit disruption, your name cannot include a message or violate our rules of the quorum. If your registered name doesn't meet this requirement, then our staff will use the chat feature to gather that information from you. Taylor Hill from our staff is helping to moderate the meeting and will be messaging with the attendees to coordinate on any questions with your commenting registration. Staff is handling a number of tasks. Please limit messages to technical issues and minimal changes to your registration. Taylor Hill will be calling the names of those who wish to comment and unmuting lines. When Taylor unmutes your line and lets you know it's your turn, please state your first and last name, indicate the topic you're speaking on, and the 2-minute timer will begin. At the 2-minute mark, we will announce time and your microphone will be muted. We will now open our general comment period. Taylor, please start with our first comment.
It looks like we have about 8 people here to speak for general comment, first of which will be Michael Valentine, followed by Emily Fairbanks, and then Oscar Arvizu. Michael, you are now unmuted.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. So I'd like to start off reading a letter real quick. It's an email I got last night. It says, good evening. I came across your website and have to thank you for your efforts. I'm going to place an order and make a donation to help save the theater. Alexander Pantages was my ancestor, and my family wears our name as a badge of honor. In recent years, we lost the battle over saving the theater in Vancouver. There are so few left that Alexander built, even fewer that bear the name. On behalf of my entire family here in Los Angeles, Vancouver, and across the world, we appreciate your efforts and support you. That's an email from a Pantages family member, Rda Pantages. So, yeah, this needs to end. You know, it's been 2 years of this. The Pantages is historic. We just nominated for the National Registry, and it's time for you guys to all support us and make it a city landmark, something you could do right away, right now, something that you, Aaron, could do with a flick of a pen. You guys are discrediting national experts by not doing this, and you're also discrediting the State Historical Office and the National Park Service, you know, state and federal government that agree with us that the Pantages is historic. You all took an oath of office to put the people of our community first. You guys are not doing that right now. You're hiding behind lawyers. You're putting the needs of one corporation and threats of lawsuits and bullying ahead of the people of our community and saving historic theater. Aaron, you took political bribes from Joe LaSalle weeks before you voted on this as a city council member. You know, Joe stands to make millions of dollars from this. You never disclosed this or recuse yourself. You guys have a chance to do right by this. This is your chance of redemption, your one chance. You should need to take it, stop protecting Danny Waltz and Hines, and do the right thing, you know, fulfill your oath of office. And let's end this right now. Let's like make the Pantages the city landmark. You guys can do this right now. Support the people. The entire community wants this theater saved. This is your one chance. So we're asking you to help us and work with us. You know, do the right thing. Let's represent the voters here, represent your constituents. Stop representing corporation. Come on, what's going on? So come on, let's do this. Thanks.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
I
Wharton.
think accusing the mayor of bribery violates our terms of our meetings. So,
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, Board Member Wharton. Michael, we appreciate your comments and your persistence and your engagement with the city, but we do not accept defamatory remarks towards any of our staff, towards the mayor, towards any of us. So please refrain from doing those. It's unfair and we are not going to accept those. Please refrain from those in the future or you will be muted. Thank you. Taylor with the next comment.
So next we will hear from Emily Fairbanks and then Oscar Arvizu and then Mark Lawrence.
And some
Emily,
Quorum study look the same too, but at the same time.
Okay.
Not
Let's
here.
Yeah, let's move on to Oscar, and then we'll hear from Mark Lawrence and then Colin Cronin. Oscar, you're unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, again, I was just also going to support the Pantages Theater. It's just really a shame to be losing that theater, and I really hope that the city reconsiders a lot of their movements and actions and look at this actions to kind of preserve and put the theater on historical list and kind of reevaluate that and the cries of the people that are actually trying to save the theater, and they're barely finding out what's been going on. And there's kind of been, like, a lot of people feel that there has been a deceiving kind of actions taken without really getting involved or having the city or the citizens involved in these actions. And, you know, it originally was purchased to be restored, and now it's just being torn down just because the development company doesn't feel like it's worth their time or effort. And at this point, you know, it's the city's a personal responsibility to try to save these historic landmarks and history of the city. And it's a really shame to be just throwing it away just for another box and glass apartment buildings and stuff where they can really build those everywhere. We have a lot of other lands and parking lots they can take over, and they don't need to come in and tear this down. It's just a really shame, and I hope the city reconsiders this and hopefully does the right thing. Thank you.
And then it looks like Mark has left the meeting, so we will move on to Colin Cronin, followed by Sharon Franz, and then Rda Staff. Colin, you're now unmuted.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think, you know, just echoing that last sentiment, as, you know, somebody who's lived in Salt Lake for well over a decade, who really appreciates the history that the city has, and being able to watch it become a city that people are flocking to from around the country. I think it's certainly the duty of any government body or organization within the city to do its best to maintain its history. The church does its part to maintain their history throughout the state and city. And I think, you know, as a city full of taxpayers that are many of them non-Mormon, you know, there's a history there that needs to be saved as well, and that, you know, the church can't save everything. Our tax dollars and our elected officials have to stand up and take care of that. And, you know, that's an expectation I have when I vote for people like Aaron Mendenhall and others, that they will fight to maintain what was here before and not just allow our city to turn into something that looks very different. You know, no problem with progress, but like was said, you know, there are other places to develop, and a piece of American history is lucky enough to be in our city. And I think we should do everything we can to make sure that we're good stewards of it and that we can hold on to it. And it just doesn't seem like a lot is being done on the part of the city to do so. So just call that more effort be done. And you guys have a lot of power to do that. So I hope you guys participate in the way that you should to protect an amazing historic site like the Pantages. Thank you.
And next we will hear from Sharon Franz, followed by Robert Stephanic, and then David Berg. Sharon, you're now unmuted.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for taking time today to listen to our general comments. I too am speaking to save the Pantages Theater. Right now we have got it, or it will be listed on the National Historic Registry, and we're trying to get it listed as a city landmark. And my understanding is that the RDA has the power to do that. I have been reading the 200 and some odd page Salt Lake City Community Preservation Plan that was written, I'm not sure what date, but I will cite, it's page 27 of 206. It looks like section 2, page 10 on the goals. There is one specifically that says the goal is to rehabilitate historic buildings for cultural uses wherever possible. Now, I know we have many beautiful theaters, the brand new Eccles, the historic Capitol Theater, but the Pantages is a unique theater and a unique venue for a lot of entry-level movies, other theatrical presentations. It doesn't have to be the big Broadway ones that bring value to our city. I'm asking that the RDA please vote or do whatever's in their power to please make the Pantages Theater a city landmark to protect it for future uses. Thank you.
And next we will hear from Robert Stephanic, followed by David Berg, and then Matt Lambros. Robert, you're now unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Well, first off, I'm here to talk about the Pantages Theater and the fact that, you know, why is it that we were told for years that it couldn't be on the National Registry, just to find out that Mike and Save the Utah Pantages group were able to get it on the Historical Registry because it did qualify. Now, my next question is as a taxpayer and my tax dollars were used to pay for this theater back in '09 with the purpose of restoring it, why is it that our money was used, and when we ask you to do something to put this on the Salt Lake Historical Landmark, you're not listening to us? I am kind of appalled on that. And again, I will vote for who wants to save this theater, because I'm in other historical buildings, because it's getting kind of tiring to see this theater or this city turn into a glass, boring, another like copy of another city. We have a unique skyline. We have a unique history. Let's keep it unique. Let's not copy other cities. So as the majority owners, the taxpayers, we want that theater on the Historical Registry. And we will vote this election year. There's 5 seats available. We'll vote for who wants to save the theater and other historic buildings. we won't revote you in. That's all I have to say.
And next we will hear from David Berg, followed by Matt Lambros, and then Shane Franz. David, you're now unmuted.
Great, thank you. And thank you for taking my remarks. I appreciate it. I wanted to urge the City Council in the form of the RDA to grant historic landmark status to the Utah Pantages Theater immediately. Something that came up earlier was the idea about taking campaign donations from the developers just a few days before voting to $0 corporate welfare, our SLC citizen-owned historic Utah Pantages Theater for $0 again. Now that may or may not legally be a bribe when the mayor and other council members did that, but it certainly violates, it seems to violate Salt Lake City Code 2.46.050H, and it definitely violates the spirit of that code, as well as common ethics and decency. I'm asking you, we're all asking you to do the right thing, listen to your constituents, live up to the promise made to Salt Lake City citizens when the city spent our hard-earned taxpayer dollars to buy it and promised at that time to restore the historic Utah Pantages Theater. We're asking you to save the theater and immediately make it a city historic landmark. Please do the right thing. Please listen to citizens, not patrons or those who have donated to your campaign coffers. Thanks.
And next we will move on to Shane Franz, followed by Mario Ruiz. Shane, you're now unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Also calling to comment about the historic Pantages and to request for your support to have the historic landmark status. You'll have to forgive me, I'm operating on my cell phone today, but there is a document that Chris Wharton and others shared with me. It's the Salt Lake City Community Preservation Plan, adopted October 23rd, 2012. Folks, for those of you that may not be familiar with this or haven't read it, it's a 200-page document, and there's a lot of thinking that went into this document about how important historic preservation is, and it really is just excellent. And in this document, they go on to outline many city policies, and in particular, there is a policy, I'm going to see if I can get it here. Policy 2.2I says that the city should place city-held preservation easements on or designate as landmark sites city-owned structures that meet the criteria for landmark site status prior to the city disposing of these important properties. So I'd like to ask the RDA and the city council members that are here why we are neglecting our own city policies and our own preservation documents and efforts. That there's been a great deal of effort to put these things into place. Anyway, that's my comment. Again, thank you for your support, and just very concerned about what I'm seeing here. Something just doesn't smell right in this deal.
And now we will hear from Mario Ruiz. Mario, you're now unmuted.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for your time. I just wanted to also support and ask that you all support historic landmark status for the building. I recently moved here from New York about a year ago, having gone to college at the U about 20 years ago. Coming back 20 years later, it's been quite eye-opening to see the level of development, much of which seems kind of haphazard. There seems to be little respect for history in the past, and you know, what I thought Salt Lake was what made Salt Lake so unique. A lot of what gave it its soul was the fact that it is a building and that it is a city that is somewhat, you know, somewhat older. A lot of it was built in the late 1800s, turn of the century. So there tends to be, a few holdout buildings that speak to Utah's past. And, having heard a bit about and learned a little bit about the history of this particular building, I just find it shocking that we're even having this conversation, especially since, from what I'm hearing, we had the ability as owners of the building to do the right thing and not just sort of hand it over to developers who seem to want to just build these ugly, big, generic buildings. And I just fear that Salt Lake City is becoming, fast becoming a very generic looking, bland place. I know there's so much effort to try to appeal to people from out of state, places like New York and other places where these places have a sense of history. I just would ask that, that the actual inherent integrity of properties like this be respected and protected. Thank you.
And it looks like that was our final commenter for general comment.
Move on. We have no public hearings today, so we're moving to item C1, and we need the board will approve, which is approval of minutes. Excuse me. The board will approve the meeting minutes of Tuesday, August 24th, 2021.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
We have a motion by board member Rogers and second by board member Mano. I'm sorry, guys. I need to roll call this, correct? Okay. So, remember Rogers?
Yes.
Ferris?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Mano?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Is Fowler here? She's absent and I'm a yes. So we are approve those minutes. The board will consider a motion to ratify the chair's determination to continue meeting remotely and without an anchor location due to the health and safety of the people who may be in attendance, and considering the continued closure of the city and county building to the public. Any would like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we ratify the chair's determination that meeting in person continues to represent an ongoing threat due to the emergency of the pandemic, and that we ratify the decision to continue meeting without an anchor location.
Second.
I have a motion by board member Wharton and seconded by board member Dugan. I'm going to roll call. Rogers?
Yes.
Ferris?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Mano?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Fowler? She's absent and I'm a yes. That passes. And we're one moment. I think we have one more comment. Apparently we have one more person registered to speak that we skipped. I could.
Madam Chair, just to clarify,
Yeah,
it's not
go
that
ahead,
we
Sharon.
skipped them, they registered late, and so it's up to you as chair to go back to the general comment section if you would like to.
Okay, let's do that because it's just one comment. So let's go back to item, to the general comments to the board, item 1. Please go ahead, Taylor.
Okay, so the other people who registered are Kisiana Kaneva and then Casey McDonough.
I thought it was just one. Okay. Let's.
Yeah, there was one more right as you said that.
So I'm only going to allow this 2 because we have a meeting. We started late today. So let's hear from them and then we have to move on. Go ahead, Taylor.
It looks like they have both left the meeting already. So,
Okay. Never mind. They can submit the comments in writing if they'd like, or call our phone line. Thank you. We're moving on to item 3. It's a resolution, Richmond Flats loan amendment. We will be briefed about this loan amendment. And at the table, we have Allison Rowland from our office, Tracy Tran, who is a RDA project manager, and Tammy Hansaker, RDA deputy COO. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't intend to actually do an introduction, and there's no staff report for this item because it seems pretty straightforward. So I'll just turn it directly over to Tracy and or Tammy. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Taylor, would it be okay if I shared my screen? I just go over a few quick slides.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good afternoon. So we received a request for a loan term amendment for a $1.8 million high opportunity area affordable housing loan that was approved to CDCU, or the Community Development Corporation of Utah, for their Richmond Flats project. So just to give a quick overview, the affordable housing development is located near 2960 South Richmond. You can see the location in the yellow here on the map, and it is located within a high opportunity area, which you can see in the dark blue. And just to give some additional context, this area just south of the development is Brickyard. This was the first and only loan that was approved using the high opportunity area affordable housing funds that the board had set aside in 2017. And the board approved the $1.8 million loan with conditions in 2019. And in 2020, the board approved an amendment to the loan terms, which structured the loan into 2 phases that would allow for the acquisition of the property in phase 1 that could roll into a longer term construction and permanent loan in phase 2 if certain conditions are met. Just to give a quick summary, it's a $1.8 million loan structured in 2 phases. The development will have 55 units, 100% of which will be affordable to households between 25 to 50% AMI, with a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. It'll be built under the Energy Star and Enterprise Green Community programs. And the project has been rezoned, planned, designed, and financed. They've also received tax credits for this project. But due to the high land costs and the impact on tax credits, CDCU does need to restructure the loan a bit. So they are just asking for just one amendment to the loan term regarding the lien language. The approved term states that the RDA shall have a lien on both the land and the improvements. CDCU is requesting that the lien is on the land only. The RDA Finance Committee reviewed the request and recommended approval of the proposed amendment. And this shows the red lines of the proposed changes. The proposed lien language is highlighted in yellow. So that's just having the lien on the land and not on the improvements. And all the other red lines are pretty minor, just clarifying modifications that don't have a substantial, that are not substantial. And just wanted to mention that CDCU has already closed on the first phase of this loan, so the proposed changes only impact the second phase. In terms of the next steps, and in terms of some considerations and next steps, the land itself provides adequate collateral with an 82% loan to value ratio. And then the amendment will help the project's credit efficiency rating on their tax credits. And this would be the first development using the high opportunity area funds. And if approved, CDCU will work to close on the second phase of the loan and other financials in October. Groundbreaking and 12-month period construction to commence after the closing. We do have some representatives from CDCU and their developer here to answer any questions, and I'm also happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Tracy. Board members, do you have questions for the applicant or staff? Go ahead, Member Mano or Director.
Madam Chair, thanks. Yeah, Tracy, I just wanted to clarify, the need for the change in terms is due to a different lender's requirements, or is there a different reason why they're requesting this change in terms? I know you said it, but I didn't quite grasp it.
Yeah, so it's based on their tax credits and how they were, I think, were awarded the tax credits. They didn't include the land value in the total costs, which impacts kind of their efficiency rating. And I think Todd Frieder from CDCU and Christian Pritchett are here from the development team to kind of explain that better. I'm sorry, I'm not super dialed in with that process. So that so we would have just a lien on the land, which we do have adequate collateral to cover.
And just a quick note clarifying the structure of the project. Community Development Corporation of Utah will maintain long-term ownership of the land and will ground lease to a new entity that is developing the improvements, which is the building on the property. So it was that structure, the ground lease structure, that helped their tax credit application.
Great. Anybody else has any comments or questions? Right, I don't see anybody's hand up. Right. So, so this is just a briefing. Tammy, we're not supposed to vote or anything at this moment, or?
Yes, there's a resolution in your packet, and it would just be approving those very minor amendments to the term sheet.
Okay. And we would do that right now, correct?
Yes.
All right. Board member, directors, if you don't have any other questions, and if somebody would like to make a motion.
Madam Chair, I
Mm-hmm.
move that we approve the proposed amendment to the Richmond Flats Affordable Housing Loan Term Amendment as presented today.
Second.
We have a motion by Director Dugan and seconded by Director Wharton. I'm going to roll call this. Director Rogers?
Yes.
Ferris?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Mano?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Fowler? I think she's absent, and I'm a yes, and that passes. Thank you to the applicants and staff for presenting that. We're moving on to item 4, which is a resolution as well, RDA Budget Amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2021-22. We have Ben Lucky from the council office, Danny Walls, Ari Cunningham, and Mary Beth Thompson from the administration. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Chairperson Valdemoros. Since we're running a little behind, I'll be quick with this item. It's the first briefing for RDA Budget Amendment number 1, and you'll notice the consent agenda today includes setting the date of October 12th for the public hearing. There are 3 proposed items. And Taylor, you can take down the presentation right now. The first item is a request for $116,000 from the Revolving Loan Fund to provide relocation and rental expenses to current tenants on Main Street. These are tenants that are in the street level commercial spaces that are part of the Utah Theater property. The tenants will need to relocate once the sale of the Utah Theater closes. The funding amount was estimated based on 1 year of market rent in the downtown area for the same square footage of retail space. If the request is approved by the board, then the revolving loan fund would have an available to spend balance of $7.3 million. The second item is a request for $105,000 from the North Temple Strategic Intervention Fund for a technical analysis study of daylighting the city creek along the Folsom Trail. Daylighting a creek is the act of taking what is a buried stream and bringing it to the surface. The technical analysis is a follow-up to a recently completed daylighting feasibility study. The nonprofit Seven Canyons Trust raised over $95,000 for the study. With the additional $105,000 that's proposed, it would be $200,000 budgeted for the study. The North Temple Strategic Intervention Fund has a balance of $4 million, so this would decrease it to just under $3.9 million. And then the last item, the third one, is an accounting adjustment to that same fund, the North Temple Strategic Intervention Fund. The annual budget consolidated several funding sources to create a single $4 million account balance. The amendment would reverse some of those transfers, and this is necessary to comply with state law. It requires certain funds, particularly housing funds, be placed in a separate account. So while some of the funds would be placed back into a separate account, they would still be considered part of the North Temple Strategic Intervention Fund. So you can think of these as housekeeping adjustments that are necessary for compliance. That's it for an overview of the three items. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair.
Sorry, I muted it and was looking at the agenda. Go ahead.
So with the relocation expenses for these are the commercial tenants like Beckett and Rob, I guess, in the Utah Theater. Why wouldn't the developer help with those funds, or are these matching funds? Seems like that might be something that they would do, or is that in our ordinance somewhere that we do that just because it currently / historically was an RDA property?
My understanding is this is not required, but this is a recommendation from the administration. I don't think they're matching funds. I'd defer to the RDA staff for additional background.
Yeah, thanks, Ben, and thanks for the question. Director Mono, as Ben alluded, this is not required. This is not something that we had negotiated or put onto the developer. Our leases with those tenants have been short-term with a notice to vacate. And so this was something that staff has just proposed as part of leading up to the closing on the property, that in order to help the tenants relocate and move, that we would provide this assistance. I should note that we have, over the past year and a half, waived the rent for these tenants as part of the COVID pandemic, and they also received portions of the ARPA grant funds that you as a board approved. So understanding that obviously it is still not 100% back to normal in terms of the economic situation for retailers, we thought as an agency this would be a good thing to do to help them in that relocation.
Thanks. I guess as a policy point, I think it would be worth discussing at least for future times when there are land write-downs for the relocation cost to be part of the developer's responsibility in lieu of that land write-down. But I understand that that wasn't negotiated, and so that's not something that can get put in at this point.
Great. Thank you for that. I wrote it down. It seems appropriate maybe to look into that, Director Mano. And so I will make a note, and then I will talk to the administration about that. Anybody else about this budget amendment? Any questions? anybody's hands up or any concerns? Ben, do we need to vote on this resolution right now, correct?
No, you actually can't because you need to hold a public hearing first. Later on the agenda today, you'll set the public hearing date for next month. And then after holding the public hearing, you can close it and vote in October.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Sorry, the agenda doesn't say the previous one said resolution and then the second one says resolution. So I assumed we had to vote on it as well. All right. If nobody else has any other questions, we're moving on to item number 5, which is informational and about project area extensions. We have Ben as well here with us, Danny and Tammy, to talk about this. Go ahead.
This is the first briefing for the board to potentially extend the property tax increment collection period for project areas. Note there are 2 deadlines for board action under state law. The earlier deadline is the board would need to adopt a resolution extending the Depot District project area before November in order to meet state law noticing requirements. All other project area extensions would need to be done by the end of the calendar year. The earlier deadline for the Depot District was just identified this week. The option to extend the property tax increment collection period by 2 years was made available by the state legislature. The project area extension can be done unilaterally by the board without approval of other taxing entities like the school district and the county. Extending a project area by 2 years means the property tax increment will continue to be collected for those 2 additional years. Those funds are still subject to allowable uses for RDA funds under state law, as well as the adopted project area plan. Also, if an interlocal agreement with a taxing entity sets a maximum for how much of their property tax increment can be collected, then a project area extended by 2 years is still subject to that maximum amount. So if you do a 2-year extension, but that maximum is reached before the 2 years, it would not result in additional tax increment from that entity. The board must identify pandemic-related negative impacts that were experienced by the project area as the basis for extension. And some examples could be delayed implementation, if a project was canceled or if it was scaled back, and loss of property tax increment. The administration is recommending 4 project areas be extended for the full 2 years. These are the Central Business District, the Granary District, the North Temple project area, and the Depot District. And remember that the board would need to act before November to extend the Depot District in order to meet those state law noticing requirements. The transmittal includes estimated amounts for how much property tax increment would be generated by the 2-year extension in those 4 areas. It also includes potential uses for that additional revenue. There are several policy questions in the staff note, such as coordinating with the school district and the county for spending the additional property tax increment and what shared priorities the city, the RDA, and they might have. The potential for increased bond capacity. This is specific to the Central Business District and North Temple, since they're about halfway through their project lifespans. The 2 other project areas are scheduled to expire in 2022 and 2023, so there's not enough time to bond for projects in those areas. There's also a policy question about project-specific ideas that board members have raised over the last year, such as the Downtown Open Main Street Initiative and taking the adaptive reuse program and making it available in project areas other than the granary district. The last page of the staff note has a table that shows all of the project areas that generate tax increment and when they will stop generating tax increment. That's everything I have on this item.
Thank you, Ben. Danny, is something that you would like to keep presenting on, or would you like the?
I think Ben covered a lot of it. I just wanted to highlight some of the primary objectives as we work with the mayor and other departments on putting this before the board for consideration. The proposed uses of funds within each area focus on the goals and objectives to, one, provide immediate assistance and short-term recovery for businesses and property owners within the project area, also with an eye on what that long-term investment could be in growth of the tax base. But primarily also looking to balance that with equity, sustainability, and what that tax base growth could be as we look to utilize these funds. And then one of the other objectives that we were charged with was to work to focus on residents within the project areas who have been hit hardest by COVID. So those would be lower income and minority residents that we could help to identify as a function of the programs and the funding assistance. So I am happy to go through the project areas and the goals that we've provided. I just wanted to note to the board that the board's role in this would continue to be to approve what the ending financial plan would be on how to utilize these funds specifically within each project area. For the two shorter project areas, that would likely just happen as part of the agency's annual budget. For the longer life project areas, that would likely be part of what we hope to bring back to the board as a capitalization structure of how to utilize the increment that we won't receive for several years, but potentially borrow or bond against that so that we can convert that into dollars today and then come back to the board with a spending plan for that as well. Beyond that, just a few notes on some of the project areas that we did not propose to extend. Most of that is because of the reason that several of our project areas are either limited use in funds like West Capitol Hill or North Temple Viaduct, where the use of those funds was for a specific project or purpose that either has been completed or does not necessarily meet the qualifications of being impacted by COVID. Other specific purpose project areas like Block 67 or Northwest Quadrant or even Stodler Rail are driven primarily by development and reimbursement agreements. The one project area that the board may want to consider also adding to the list would be Block 70, the Eccles Theater development. That is specific to the development of the theater itself. However, the additional increment could obviously be used for either ongoing expenses or to help cover the debt service that the agency and the city have paid to that project. So I'd put that out there as something as if the board wanted us to consider and bring back. Otherwise, the next steps would be that if the board chose to move forward, we'd return with the resolutions for the extensions and then also get into greater discussions on what those proposed uses of the funds would be for the board's consideration and approval as we do that. So that's all I have to add unless there are additional questions.
For directors, do you guys have any questions or staff about, or any comments or any feelings about the extension of these 4 areas? No. Don't see anybody raising their hands or nodding or assenting. However, Danny, I have a question for you. Do you need I think this was also informational, correct? Do you need us to give you any direction like today to say, yes, we're interested in this, move forward, or
yeah, I think it'd be great either a straw poll in support or heavily opposed that you do not wish us to come back with the resolutions to propose extending these project areas. Any direction you can give us would be great.
I do want to highlight, I think the time sensitivity of the depot district needing to be acted on before November, that would probably need board direction today in order for the administration and the attorney's office to prepare a resolution for you to vote on next month if you want to.
Great. So, Danny, I think the question for me is this 2-year extension, so we have to prove certain things, correct? That so that we can get approval, right? Like we're within our legal requirements, you know, because of COVID or because of other issues. And then this doesn't mean that we have to go to the other entities to extend, correct? Or we do?
Correct. The state statute does not require you to go to the other entities for approval. However, as we mentioned in the memo, as part of when we figure out the plan for utilizing the funds, we have suggested at that time we would reach out to those entities and see how we could try to address some of their goals and objectives as well as we plan on spending those funds. So that would be part of what we would return to the board with that discussion on utilizing the funds and provide at that time what those conversations bring forward.
Okay, great. But so that's for the 2 years, and then board members, you know, after those 2 years or after this, it's about to sunset. If we wanted to extend the areas again, without without this option that we have right now, we will have to go back and start over. I just wanted to make that distinction because it was unclear before to me, but now it is clear. So right now we're fine, we can do it. We will talk to the entities, but we don't need approval from them. In the future, if we want to extend any of the areas that we currently have, then we will have to start the process over. Talk to the entities, look at the boundaries, etc., etc. Okay. All right, I am in favor of this. I'm not sure if I can propose a straw poll. Can I? Or somebody help me out here. Or
you can propose.
Go ahead. Who's Board Member Mano?
Thanks. Before you make your straw poll, I guess I think a lot of whether I'm supportive of this or not will depend on our next agenda item, which is how RDA resources are spread between project areas and how they align with our values. Because while I think that we should, I mean, these are areas that still need RDA investment, I worry that further extension of some areas and the discussion of creation of new areas will make other project areas that are also important continue to not receive attention. For instance, 9 Line and State Street are the ones that come to mind immediately. So I think my decision on this will depend on our next discussion to a certain degree.
So I don't know how to reconcile that because I don't know, Cindy or Jen, any suggestions here to do the straw poll or not? Or
Madam Chair, I think you should just make the straw poll and Board Member Mano can either decide yea or nay on it.
All right, thank you. So my straw poll is that we ask staff to come back with the resolutions to extend the 4 project areas for 2 years as they have presented today. So show me your feelings like Amy says. All right, James said yes, Darren said yes. I can see everybody's thumbs up. Everybody except Director Fowler that is not here. All right, Danny, there you go.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Let's see, what's my agenda here? Okay, we're moving on to item number 6, and which is informational strategic alignment of RDA values and resources. And at the table we have Danny Walls and Tammy Hansaker. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Taylor, can I share my screen? All right, can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Great. So backing up several decades since 1969, the RDA has been a major player in many of Salt Lake City's residential, commercial, and public places. We've helped create over 7,000 housing units. We've been responsible for the historic renovation and adaptive reuse of over 50 existing buildings. We've dispersed $55 million in commercial loans and invested over $170 million in public improvements. But earlier this year, RDA staff started to have very deep discussions about how we can continue to implement meaningful, impactful projects and evolve to cultural, economic, and environmental conditions that we see today. And these conditions include unprecedented increases in housing costs, recognition of the historic role of development in systemic racism and neighborhood disinvestment, and compounding issues surrounding growth and environmental impacts. All of these needs that are compounding are in a current environment where the RDA's resources are limited. We've had Sugar House and West Temple Gateway come offline. Depot District and Granary will come offline soon. However, you just discussed extending those for 2 years. And we do have 9 Line and State Street coming online as new project areas, which is great. But we as a staff and under the guidance of the mayor have really come together to talk about how we can target resources to community needs in a better way. And these discussions have really revolved around ensuring the inclusion of equitable development strategies, which is actually the next agenda item that you will hear. We developed an equity work plan, which Ashley Ogden on our staff spearheaded. We want to set sustainable development standards and incentives and be really clear about what those are. It's really important that we look at ways to tighten up the way we disperse funding, and we really want to make sure we're dispersing all funding on a competitive basis. We want to increase threshold requirements for accessing funding so we know we're funding those projects that align with our goals and values to the utmost standards, make resources available to a diverse array of development partners, including those that haven't historically accessed our tools. So this would be smaller community partners and smaller developers and property owners, and expand resources to implement projects and better target funding, including tracking financial indicators and metrics to ensure the financial sustainability of the RDA. And also, as the board has talked about a lot, we are looking at taking a longer term approach to development projects, including the balancing of implementing public benefits with retaining an ongoing interest in the project or in the land. So what you have in your packet is proposed policy and program revisions, a high-level schedule of what RDA staff proposes bringing forward to the board over the next several months in order of the items coming to you in the near future. In fact, the Equity Work Plan and the West Side Community Initiative are in your packet today. So I will briefly, I know we're tight on time, but I will briefly just go through this schedule. The Equity Work Plan is an administrative document to identify goals and actions to expand our tools in alignment with equity principles. And Ashley will present on that next. As part of that equity framework, we are proposing a few tweaks to the guiding framework for mission and values that you approved in November of 2019. These are relatively minor changes just to beef up the equity and also sustainability components of that policy. We have a new sustainability policy that we've been working on for several months under the mayor's direction. We've received community feedback on that policy, and that policy should be coming to the board for an initial discussion, I believe, next month. We have a RDA housing allocation funds policy that was recently adopted. It was adopted this year, but we're contemplating a minor tweak to that policy to incorporate the West Side Community Initiative program that we're proposing that is also going to be discussed today. And that is a new program proposing the utilization of inland port housing funds to advance community wealth building through affordable homeownership and other public benefit projects on the city's west side. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. We also, as part of that program, are proposing a new program for shared equity housing development to really promote affordable homeownership throughout the city. And then we are also proposing to revamp our commercial development loan program to better leverage and target resources. Part of this discussion with the commercial loan program will be the adaptive reuse program that the board has demonstrated interest in expanding to other project areas besides just the Granary District. We're also proposing to update the housing development loan program policy. The board in this year's budget appropriated some funding for accessory dwelling units. So we've discussed as a staff, instead of creating a brand new program, we want to add on to the housing development loan program to allow for a financing package for ADUs. We're also proposing a new program called Storefront Activation. We'll get into this in the next agenda item a little bit, and this also comes from Chairwoman Valdermoros's interest in keeping local businesses within the neighborhoods that they reside in as neighborhood changes occurs to provide affordable commercial space for local businesses. Really quick, we also want to update the tax increment reimbursement program to kind of increase the threshold requirements and the standards for providing funding. And then we also need to create a new cultural and community initiative program. That funding was appropriated through the current budget for this initiative. And that's the lighter, quicker, cheaper model to incentivize either small scale capital projects or capacity building for community organizations. So we recognize this is an aggressive schedule, and a lot of these items are already in the works. But we wanted your feedback and comments. Do you think we're going in the right direction? Is there anything in addition to what I've outlined that you want to see? Any feedback you could provide today would be great.
Tammy, thank you so much. These are all great. And I would love to hear from the directors, and like Tammy said, if there's anything that we think it's still needed, or any comments on what we have, on what the RDA has, please. This is your time. This is your chance. I don't see anybody. I see. Okay, I see Dan.
Tammy, this is as you're right, this is a very aggressive timeline and a lot of work here, along with everything else we got going on. So I appreciate it. It might be a bigger bite to take than we can digest, but I'm up for the challenge, and I think it's the right way to go. So I appreciate it.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Darren.
Tammy, thank you for that. I agree, these are all great. My question is, aside from the West Side Community Initiative, which ones of these are there any that are specifically to create geographic equity throughout the city, or anything else that sort of looks specifically at investment on the West Side?
Specifically for the West Side, it is the West Side Community Initiative that's targeted geographically. But in general, I think some of the items outlined in the equity work plan that Ashley Ogden will present on next work to increase opportunity and those aspects of a neighborhood that increase a person or a household's likelihood for upward mobility, which is what we're trying to do in neighborhoods such as the West Side. And then also support the distribution of affordable housing throughout the city, including in areas that currently lack affordable housing on the East Side. So there's elements throughout all of these policies that will promote that geographic equity, but it is the West Side Community Initiative that's specifically targeted to a geographic area, if that makes sense.
It does, thank you.
Anybody else?
Mine's just more of a comment than a question, Madam Chair. But I think that it makes sense to start working on these revisions, given the strategic plan or the strategic mission and values and goals that we set last year. And so I think this is really ambitious, and I'll look forward to seeing what comes of it. But I really appreciate the focus on equity. I see that a lot in the plan. And then also, that we added sustainability as one of the, I don't remember what we called it, like a core value, I guess, or an objective. I don't remember if it was a value or an objective, or maybe it was both. But I like, kind of making that a little bit more concrete, so we know exactly what that is going to look like, and so that people seeking RDA funds will know that as well. So thanks for doing that in advance.
Great. James, would you like to say anything about the West Side Community Initiative? Any final thoughts on that, which you started, and I love that idea. So this is one of my favorite ones.
No,
I'm
just super excited too. I'm just so appreciative to Danny and especially Tammy for their hard work on that. I don't know if we're going to dive into it yet, but just the amount of effort in really trying to understand where I'm coming from, and and helping other council members understand that too. It's just, to me, that's going to be transformative, and it's going to be something that's going to, in 15 years, everybody's going to say, how did Salt Lake City do that? I truly believe that. And I think that other cities, it's already being spoken about. I've talked about that before. We have developers in Salt Lake City who have sat down with Danny and Tammy, and they've talked to them about it and what we're looking at doing. And they develop across the nation. They say they've never seen anything like it. So, just all the credit to staff and to Danny and your team for making that happen. Like I said, specifically Tammy, and making those changes and pivot to what we as a board are looking at doing and accomplishing. So it's going to be fantastic.
Thank you, James. And I think, my final comments on that, this one feels like, sometimes, the city is criticized for being more reactive than proactive on certain things. And this could be more timely, with our current market for home ownership. This could be more timely for the city to start thinking realistically, and also we're very focused on trying to help the neighbors in an equitable way, and help those that probably right now with the current market, it's almost impossible to be able to afford a home, and that the city has, or the RDA has, this type of intervention. I think it's amazing. So bravo to to staff and the mayor and the rest of the board that actually are interested in doing this, and it seems like we have the thumbs up. So
great. Thank you, Madam Chair. And we will get into additional detail on the West Side Community Initiative in 2 agenda items, so you will hear more.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. I think we're moving on to the next agenda item. Sorry, my agenda. We are moving on to item number 7, which is the RDA Equitable and Inclusive Development Work Plan. And at the table, we have Tammy Hunsaker and then Ashley Ogden. And we are actually not behind schedule, like we have 15 minutes still, so we're ahead of schedule. So take your time. You don't have to rush. So go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just turn it over to Ashley. She has a great presentation to run through.
All right, thanks, Tammy. Let me share my presentation really quickly. Sorry. All right, sorry for the delay. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Ogden. I will be discussing what we're calling the RDA's Equitable and Inclusive Development Work Plan, which is included in your packet. And it's just one piece of the larger strategic realignment of the RDA's values and resources that Tammy just shared with you all. Tammy already covered a lot of the background on why staff finds that it's necessary to improve the RDA's approach to community investment. And this specific work plan is a result of many long and hard internal conversations that we've had related to racial and social inequities that exist within the real estate industry and what the RDA's role should be within that context. My memo includes a few examples of how the industry has used tools like redlining to intentionally suppress and segregate minority communities, and also how these same communities have historically been disregarded and displaced when it was time to build big economic development projects like new airports, freeways, convention centers, sports arenas, etc. And this is nationwide, not just in Salt Lake City. But today, when cities like Salt Lake are experiencing tremendous growth, the same groups of vulnerable people are feeling the pressures of gentrification and displacement now that their neighborhoods that were previously considered undesirable are seen as attractive to developers or new home buyers. I know something that stood out to me personally while I was learning about these topics is that I work for an agency whose job is to make targeted investments in these parts of the city that often by design have experienced disinvestment and neglect. So I think that when it comes to the city's racial, social, economic equity efforts, the RDA is a pretty powerful tool for us to have available. The purpose statement in the document is pretty lengthy, but I think the section shown here in bold gets to the heart of it. It reads that as part of its mission to revitalize neighborhoods and business districts in a way that fosters livability and neighborhood vibrancy, the agency is in a unique position to ensure the inclusion of equitable development strategies that encourage everyone to participate in and benefit from new investments being made in their neighborhood. So the work plan itself is meant to be an internal living guidance document that staff can reference during project prioritization and budgeting efforts. So instead of being a standalone policy, we'll use it to make sure that these principles are infused throughout all of our policies. And the plan contains 3 sections: the agency's equitable and inclusive development goals, action items for staff to take to begin to implement these goals, as well as some initial ideas for new or amended RDA programming that would directly support the work plan. And I wanted to note that we're very much aware of related efforts such as the Mayor's Citywide Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Plan and the Gentrification Mitigation Plan that CAN is leading. But due to the direct impact that the RDA has on development within our project areas, our intent with this plan is to make sure that we're evaluating our investments through this lens in a more immediate time frame, but we are fully prepared to incorporate any recommendations for the RDA that may come from these other planning efforts. So in other words, this document is sure to evolve over time. Amanda in our office made this awesome graphic that kind of shows the themes of the goals that we have developed, which I'll run through on the next few slides. And I don't like reading during a presentation, but these goals are the most important part of the work plan. So I think it's important to really cover them in detail. So please bear with me. But the first goal is related to data-informed decision-making. We like to utilize data available to us to define needs and inform where and how agency resources should be used and prioritized. That'd be within our existing project areas, part of the project area creation process, and also for citywide housing efforts. Goal number 2 is related to anti-displacement. We'd like to provide opportunities that make it more feasible for existing residents and business owners to remain living or doing business in their neighborhoods or return to neighborhoods that they may have already been priced out of. The third goal is related to wealth building. I'd like to support the creation of opportunities for those who have historically rented to build wealth and establish permanent roots through home and commercial ownership. The fourth goal is equitable relocation. I'd like to advance the rights of all to live in and enjoy a clean and healthy environment by supporting the equitable relocation of residents being displaced by new development or those living in unsafe conditions. Access to opportunity would provide opportunities to establish new services, amenities, or underrepresented business types in the neighborhood that the community identifies as lacking and desires. Environmental justice would promote the rights of the communities we serve to enjoy the same degree of protection from environmental health hazards and ensure the equitable distribution of environmental benefits, including environmental remediation, sustainable development, and safe spaces to recreate. Authentic placemaking would preserve and protect neighborhood character and cultural assets, because once the neighborhood's culture is displaced, we will find ourselves expending effort to recreate that unique character, but it will never be as authentic as it was. Community partnerships help strengthen local organizations and support leadership building by participating in community-led initiatives and partnering with neighborhood and cultural groups. Inclusive outreach would strengthen our community outreach efforts in ways that provide a platform for community members' life experiences and knowledge to inform and influence our work. And last, increased diversity of projects and applicants. We'd like to enhance the ability of non-traditional applicants to apply for agency programs and offerings through increased outreach, education, and technical assistance. The second section in the document lists action items for us as a staff to take to begin to implement this plan and begin to infuse these equitable development strategies into our work. First action item, assemble a database of indicators related to both residential and commercial vulnerability and displacement risk, and continually monitor them over time to inform the agency's decisions. I think next month, I believe, Court will be briefing the board on potential amendments to the RDA guiding framework and livability benchmarks. And Tammy touched on this a little bit, but a large goal of those amendments would be to communicate a clear value for racial and social equity, and also encourage developers to implement these strategies in their projects. We'd like to identify opportunities to amend our existing programs and policies or make new programs to address these goals, which Tammy covered as well. Identify areas where more technical assistance could be provided for non-traditional applicants. Utilize the civic engagement team's guidelines and best practices to develop more intentionally inclusive and also culturally specific community engagement. Communicate a clear value for racial and social equity in our communication materials. And we'd also like to identify opportunities to use marketing or outreach tools to reach a broader range of project types or a broader applicant pool. So the third and last section of the work plan describes some initial ideas for new or amended RDA programming that would help us begin to implement our equitable development goals, some of which Tammy did describe earlier as well. But the specifics of these programs would be refined during the policy creation processes. But the first idea we're exploring is how we could include tenant preferences in our funding programs or property dispositions. An example of this is if the RDA participated in an affordable housing development, we could potentially incentivize the developer to market the units in a way that provides preference to certain tenant types, such as income qualified residents who already reside or work within the neighborhood, or who utilize essential services within the neighborhood. The second idea is what we're calling an affordable storefront activation program, where the agency could gain control of ground floor commercial spaces through ownership or master lease, and then sublease the spaces with certain levels of affordability. This could be another opportunity to utilize tenant preferences to lease to local and small businesses, businesses at risk of displacement from the neighborhood, minority or women-owned businesses, etc. I know that Tammy and Danny discussed this third idea during the budget process, which is a funding program for cultural or community-led initiatives where a nonprofit or community-based group could apply for funds for non-housing projects. And the intent of this program would be to strengthen local community groups and support leadership building, as well as strengthen the relationship that the RDA has with the communities that we work within. And last, we've also discussed providing incentives or loans for the construction of ADUs through the Housing Development Loan Program. These types of incentives could provide financial stability to current homeowners within our project areas by increasing their property values or providing a source of rental income. So this last slide covers some overall next steps for implementing this work plan. We would like to continue gathering feedback from other city departments, boards, and committees over the next few months. And again, I believe that CORT will be briefing the board next month on proposed amendments to the guiding framework and livability benchmarks. Tammy covered some amendments we'd like to make to existing RDA programming, as well as the creation of new programming that would support a strategic realignment of the agency's work. And we will also begin to gather and track those metrics related to displacement risk and access to opportunity. I already mentioned the coordination with the ongoing citywide equity and gentrification mitigation planning efforts. And last, one of the primary ways to implement this plan is through the budgeting process and by directing dollars towards these types of initiatives. And that will be an ongoing process as well. We welcome any questions or comments that you may have on this effort, and please let us know if you feel that there's anything we may have missed.
Thank you, Ashley. Also, great work. I appreciate all of the things that you guys have put together. And I would like to open it to the board of directors to see if you have any comments, any changes, any additions that we can give some directions to staff. Go ahead, Darren.
Thanks. Where in the process is this framework and this plan going to be used? Is it in evaluating specific projects or evaluating like broader RDA initiatives like the ADU program? Does that make sense? Like where in the hierarchy of and in the workflow does this get used, or is it everywhere? And how does it get used, I guess?
I can take that if you want, Tammy. This is kind of intended just to provide kind of internal guidance to staff. And as we're developing these, amending our programs or developing new programs, I think that we will rely on this to kind of inform how those are structured and to make sure that we're always looking through this lens whenever we're making investments in the community. So it's not a standalone policy, but it will definitely inform all of our policies.
Thanks. And a follow-up to that, I think, I mean, I like all the list of 10 things that you've outlined. I'm having a little bit of flashbacks to our discussions on affordable housing when we said, here's all these amazing things that we want to do with affordable housing, but we're consistently hitting these 5, but not these 5. And so we started to prioritize those and say some are thresholds, some are high priorities, some are lower priorities. And ideally, I hope that we're revisiting that. And I think that something similar might be appropriate here, where we're saying which of these are appropriate, and maybe we're looking at the past 5 years, past 2 years, and saying these are the targets that we haven't hit with any of our projects or our initiatives. So for the next 3 years, these ones are going to be the highest priority. And so I worry that, I mean, it just feels a little bit similar to where there's 10 sort of equally existing on an equal plane, 10 different goals, and we can just sort of say, well, here's what we're going to do, and that we can claim that that hits these 4. So it's good, let's go, but there may be another 2 or 3 that we just never hit. So I think that I think this plan's great. The way that it's implemented, and if there's some sort of prioritization, I think will be the added level of to make it truly a success.
I think the idea is to begin tracking those equity and inclusion metrics and data points. And we anticipated using that administratively moving forward, but it would also be helpful to communicate that information to the board as well, I think, maybe on an annual or a semi-annual basis. So we can evaluate how we're doing and where we may need to pivot in terms of budget appropriations or adjustments to future policies.
I was reading some of what was in our packet while you were talking, so I'm sorry if I missed this, but what kind of outreach are we going to do to get resident feedback from the groups that we're trying to bring to give more like equitable consideration to, or groups that have traditionally been underserved?
I believe that is part of, and Ashley can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the next step we're really working on, is gathering additional feedback from both city departments and community partners. And a part of that process will definitely be some of those target groups that we're trying to provide additional outreach and resources to through this equity work plan. So that is still in process, and we're kind of assembling a plan to do that as we speak. And so we can report back to the board on how that progresses.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add, like, for example, I think a lot of that will occur during the actual policy creation process. For example, an affordable storefront program, you know, when we're crafting the policy itself would probably be an appropriate time to reach out to the local business community, minority and women business owners, local businesses, and get their feedback on, you know, what we can provide to really help them achieve their goals and their needs.
Thank you.
Great. Anybody else? Let me see.
Madam Chair, may I jump in and say something real fast?
Yes, for sure. Go ahead.
Obviously, as Ashley said, we've jumped out ahead as far as the agencies related, and we continue to work with the Mayor's office and the citywide effort. I wanted to also mention what you as a council and council office has asked us to do as an agency of meeting with David Parker, or Dr. Parker. And that was a part of this process as well. And so I don't want that to be missed in how we got to this point, because that was, I know, something that the council was very interested in and participated in some of those initial meetings. And so wanted to make sure that got mentioned as part of this overall approach and how we as staff kind of look to structure this. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Danny. That's great.
Can I just
They were great.
add something, if I may?
Yeah.
To Danny's point, I want to just say thank you to him and his staff, because when I said, hey, you guys should have this meeting, they were like, why? What, not in like a bad way, but like, why? What are you, what's the goal here? And I was like, I don't know yet. I don't know what the goal is yet, but something better than what we're already doing. And I love this plan. I love the work that you've put into it, the passion that is behind it, the compassion that's behind it, the creativity that's behind it. And I look forward, I mean, this is what I envisioned without knowing this is what I envisioned when we had that first meeting with Dr. Barker, right? Of how do we do this? How do we make this even more and better than what we're already doing? And so thank you for indulging me and being open and receptive and saying, yeah, let's be even better than we already are. So I really appreciate it. I look forward to implementing some of these cool programs. Again, I tell developers every time I meet with them, I'd love to see people think outside the box. And so many of these ideas that you have and are thinking about are creative and outside of the box. And I just really want to say thank you. And you guys are an amazing team to work with. So thanks for all your hard work.
Dito. Thank you, guys. All right, so if nobody else has any other comments, we are going to move on to item number 8, and it is Informational West Side Community Initiative. And at the table, we have Alison Rowland, Council Office Policy Analyst, Danny Walls, RDA, and Tammy Hansaker, RDA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you mentioned, this is the West Side Community Initiative proposal. For today, it's a first step, so it's a purely informational review, and there's no action needed on it by the board, except for, of course, listening and responding. As by way of background, you may remember that last May, Board Member Rogers proposed, and the board agreed, to use Inland Port Housing Funds specifically to promote West Side home ownership and new opportunities for small business. So as a result of this work, or this action, the RDA has done all this work to develop a proposal to meet that goal. So this proposal is intended to be broader than a typical community land trust, which is sort of the idea that I think a lot of us had in mind when Board Member Rogers suggested this. So the idea is to carry out housing development projects, but also infrastructure improvements, economic development, and redevelopment of undesirable land uses. And all of this is consistent with state statute on the use of RDA housing funds. So as you'll see with Tammy's presentation, the RDA has identified existing policies that would need to be updated or created to implement the program, a list of proposed goals for it, and its primary activities. And because Tammy was doing it, it all exists in a beautiful chart that she'll be able to show you. I wanted to draw your attention to one of the policy questions in particular, which maybe some of you are interested in, which is number 3, whether essentially the RDA has enough staffing and other resources to take on this very ambitious project. I don't know if that's a question that could be answered today, but it may be one that you find interesting. So without anything else, I will just turn it over to Tammy and Danny. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison. Can everyone see this presentation? Great.
Yes.
Diving in, as Allison just addressed, this initiative really comes from direction provided by the RDA board earlier this year to create a new program for the utilization of inland port housing funds. And as a bit of background, the RDA is receiving inland port housing funds via the Inland Port Authority Act, which directs that these funds go to the RDA and be utilized pursuant to the housing provisions in RDA statute. The geographic scope of the program, even though these funds can be used citywide, the initiative would target these fundings to the city's west side, defined as west of I-15. So this would include the entire city's west side, including the North Temple and 9-line RDA project areas. And we are tentatively calling this program the West Side Community Initiative. So what we're proposing to do is to create a new policy resolution that establishes the purposes, goals, activities, metrics, and reporting requirements for the initiative. But the initiative would really be administered pursuant to existing RDA programs and policies, and also a new program, which is the Shared Equity Housing Program. So instead of reinventing the wheel completely for this program, we wanted to identify and create overarching policy framework for the program, and then administer everything pursuant to existing RDA policies. So diving into the purpose of the program, it is to, as proposed, is to implement transformative housing and mixed-use projects with a focus on homeownership and affordability as a way of building community cohesion and personal wealth. Housing projects will be leveraged with additional public benefits, including neighborhood services, economic opportunities, and transit-oriented development. The goals we've defined for the program, or identified thus far, include to develop land with a long-term approach to continuously serve a community-defined purpose. This would include striving to retain an interest in the property, potentially through ground leases to development partners, and this would allow for an opportunity to receive revenue generation to serve other public benefits. The second goal is to create opportunities for revenue generation while balancing the implementation of public benefits. There's a balance to be had between using RDA resources for those public benefits that generate limited or no cash flow, such as affordable housing or below market commercial space, with other land uses that generate positive cash flow that can help subsidize additional public benefits. The third goal is to assist the West Side in mitigating gentrification and displacement. So the program would acquire land with the goal of holding it in perpetuity to facilitate long-term affordability. This will allow housing to remain affordable even as neighborhood change occurs and potentially gentrification pressures mount, which will protect families from displacement. The fourth goal is to give lower income households the opportunity to build wealth through home ownership, allowing families to buy homes at affordable prices by focusing on a shared equity model. This will keep the home affordable from family to family, allowing future generations to also purchase the home after it's sold by the previous family. This will allow families to go from renting to building wealth. Next, we have engaged community members in development decisions, providing opportunities for residents to be actively involved in creating positive change within their communities and to develop projects that reflect the value of residents. We would also like to leverage resources for other neighborhood development purposes, reinvest revenues acquired through ground leases or partnerships for other purposes, including subsidizing deeply affordable housing, below market commercial space, infrastructure, public art, and other public benefits. As a part of the initiative, RDA staff would also take an active role in collaborating with other partners to broaden the pool of funding and expertise for the initiative by bringing outside resources to the table through multi-sector partners. We can expand the impact in the community on both affordable housing and economic development opportunities. And all of this would be with the goal of creating a collective impact approach that produces measurable results. These results would be tracked and reported on an annual basis to promote data-driven and outcome-based decision-making. So the funding sources and activities for the initiative are proposed to be Inland Port Housing Differential, which is restricted to 80% AMI and below housing activities. But the housing activity statute is pretty broad in nature. So funding could go to a mixed use project that also has an economic development or a commercial component. Funding can also go to infrastructure improvements that support affordable housing for 80% AMI and below. So there's a lot of diversity in the types of projects we can implement, but we would actively look for other funding sources that could broaden the scope of the activities implemented through the initiative. And also the RDA Board of Directors could dedicate other resources to the initiative. I know there's been discussion regarding the station center disposition, and if there are the disposition funds acquired could be, a part of them could be allocated to this initiative if the board wishes. And then also if there's revenue generated through the WCI initiative, it would also go back into the program as a funding source. And then the activities that we're contemplating carrying out would be strategic acquisitions. And this would be strategic acquisitions of undesirable land uses, properties characterized by high crime rates, because as the board knows, sometimes projects aren't only impactful in the new project that is carried out, but in the previous land use that is removed. We would also target strategic acquisitions at strategic locations and other properties that align with the initiative and the RDA's goals. We would also create a shared equity development program, and this really would be to promote homeownership through the land trust model and also a cooperative housing development model. The land trust model would be the typical way you think of a land trust, with the RDA purchasing and maintaining long-term ownership of land, and there would be a home ownership product developed, whether it's a townhome or whatnot, that is sold to a family at an affordable rate. There would be a restriction placed on the property, so the property would appreciate over time, but that appreciation would be limited to the growth in area median income, which would ensure that when the property is sold, it would be sold at an affordable rate to the next family, while still providing the current homeowner with some equity generation. And then a new idea we're floating around is a cooperative housing development type model. And this would really be to promote homeownership at the multifamily scale. This is used a lot in other cities, particularly cities with high cost housing markets. So it would provide a framework for homeownership by bringing people together to own the building in which they live. However, the owners do not own their units outright. Instead, each resident is a shareholder in the corporation entity, and their share in that entity would be relative to the size of the unit that they live in. The RDA still could maintain long-term ownership of the land, and so then we would be a partnership in the cooperative board moving forward. And it would be the same thing with the shared equity. There would be a cap on the resale of the shareholders' share in the entity moving forward, so it would maintain affordability for the long term. We don't want, as RDA staff, to limit ourselves here, so we would like to provide to the initiative the ability to still do rental, residential, and mixed-use development projects where appropriate, and we would distribute funding through the Housing Development Loan Program to do so, and then allow for the implementation of other public benefits, other types of projects such as infrastructure projects, placemaking, historic preservation, commercial development that's leveraged as part of this larger housing initiative. So the next steps is to receive feedback from the board today to make sure we're on track with this initiative as we've proposed, and then develop a specific policy resolution for the initiatives that outlines the goals and objectives, reporting requirements, the framework of the initiative. And then we'd also come back with a new policy for the shared equity housing development program to allow for that land trust development and cooperative housing development. And then another important component would be to bring back the RDA housing allocation funds policy, which the board adopted earlier this year. It breaks out our housing into 4 accounts. We have a Northwest Quadrant account in there right now. We would change this to the WCI account that specifically earmarks funding for this initiative. And that would be a relatively quick and easy change that we could move forward with this fall. So I will turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and be happy to answer any questions you may have or receive feedback.
Thank you, Tammy, so much. Board of Directors, do you have questions about the direction that this WCI is going? Or comments? Let me see, I don't see. Okay, I don't see any. Oh yeah, okay, Dan?
Yes, Tammy, like I mentioned yesterday, the initial briefing on this, I really appreciate this. I like the vision you're putting forward on the west side about the community cohesion and the personal wealth, and not just affordable housing, but it goes into the whole package of small businesses, childcare centers, living and working in the same place. So we're building that whole community and building that cultural center there that is equitable, but also just growing the local population and not having people just commute out of the area at 8 and then come back at 5. And so I think this is really a nice initiative, and I really look forward to this moving forward on the west side, because I think there's a lot of richness there that can be just explored and just really exploded out. So I really appreciate the whole process, and thank you very much for this work.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tammy, I was thinking when you said that some projects that might be rental projects that we could potentially engage in, I think, is that, in my mind, this initiative was more towards the shared equity in my mind, not necessarily rentals. However, I don't know if it's done anywhere, but I'm thinking, if we did rentals and if we were able to have any intervention, on who these rentals go to, and keep track of these folks and put them in a track where they could actually, move out of the rental and move into the affordable, affordable housing, or be home, owners. That's something that I would be interested in seeing as well. I don't know if that makes sense. So kind of providing, especially for young families or young professionals, or not people that would like to, that unfortunately any bank, out there might not be able to lend to them. But if we were able to help those stabilize in housing with a rental, and then put them in a path forward that they could actually afford, one of the housing that we might, be doing, that's something that would be really cool. I don't think.
Yes,
I don't know.
that's
I don't know how it works.
great feedback. I think our primary intent through the initiative would be that homeownership component, but looking at community development comprehensively, I think you're exactly right. There could be some instances where it would make sense to implement a rental project, and it would be great to figure out how to have that track to kind of help people move along from rental to ownership. So that's great feedback.
Thank you. Anybody else about this? I think we're on the right track. So I'm excited to see this and to see this move forward. So if nobody else has any other comments, no? Thumbs up. Thank you, staff. We're moving on to item number 9, which is informational, an update on the Spark project, former overnighter motel at 1500 West, North Temple. And at the table, we have Alison Rowland, Danny Walls, Tammy Hunsaker, and Corinne Piazza. And also people from the Green Shore Development for questions. Go ahead, Alison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple comments as background. This is another informational briefing, so there's no need to take any action on it. And this is an update on the Spark project, which, as most of us probably recall, is the former overnighter motel on 1500 West North Temple. The idea with this informational update is to inform the council of several proposed changes to the Spark project agreement with the developer, who is Brinshore, who the RDA has worked with on a number of other big projects. So the RDA is going to review these project features and current financing issues. But as a reminder, the property was purchased by the RDA in 2017, and at that time the board adopted 2 conditions in the resolution that authorized the RFP. And I want to stress the current plan that I believe Corinne is about to talk about does, as it currently stands, does meet these conditions. The first was that any development of the property will meet the applicable policy goals of Salt Lake City's transit station area zoning. And the second is that the development of the property will not include more than 50% of affordable units. The goal on that one was that the board wished to avoid further concentrating less valuable housing on the city's west side. So again, the current plan meets these conditions, but in terms of a policy question, the board might want to discuss whether changes in circumstances mean that you'd like to modify that goal and allow an exception perhaps for this project. The context here, of course, is the ongoing housing crisis, especially for housing for people with low to middle incomes. There's also an understandable desire to see this property develop, since the city has owned it since 2017. And it may also, this development might help boost the RDA efforts along North Temple. So that's questions to consider, and I will turn it over to Corinne for the details. Thank you.
Thank you. And council staff, are you sharing the presentation? I believe.
Not yet.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Taylor. All right, hello everyone. This is oh, actually, sorry, Taylor, can I have control of the slides? That'll be easier than asking you to do it for me.
Yeah, let me switch it to you.
Thank you.
While that's happening, just for a moment of brevity, I want to mention that Corinne is coming to us on vacation from her parents' home, and we were trying to talk her into hanging her teenage posters on the wall behind her for this presentation, but she was not interested in doing that.
I thought about it. I'm sorry, I am having some trouble sharing, so maybe Taylor, if you could just keep it up, and I'll ask you to start with slide 1, or excuse me, slide 2. That would be helpful. Sorry about that. Great. All right, and we can slip to that next slide and I'll get started. Thank you so much. All right, hi everyone. So this is an RDA Tier 1 property located at the former overnighter motel at 15th West North Temple, and it is in the North Temple project area and designated as a Tier 1 property due to being over 2 acres and included in a city adopted master plan specifically as an ideal spot for signature transit oriented development in the Cornell Station area plan. As far as acquisition and development, Allison just mentioned that back in 2017, acquisition funds were approved for the problem motel property, and the RFP and developer selection was in 2018, with the selected developer being Brinshore Development, a proven developer out of Illinois with extensive expertise in affordable housing projects that focus on community-oriented mixed-use development. And we're currently in the due diligence phase where we get the work done to figure out how the project can pencil. And as Allison mentioned, today is just a project status update. There's no decisions being made. Next slide, please. The board has seen this project concept prior in 2018 and 2019. So as a refresher, the project has approximately 200 residential units, including workforce and family housing, approximately 4,000 square feet of retail, transit-oriented corner plaza, a potential daycare facility, and potential additional plaza rooftop garden space. And the estimated total project cost at this time is about $70 million, but that is subject to change at this stage in the process. As far as RDA involvement so far, it's at $10.4 million with the $4 million in acquisition of the property, with $2.5 million awarded in the RDA Affordable Housing Funds in 2018 NOFA and $3.9 million in the 2019 NOFA. Next slide, please. As far as administrative steps we've been working on, demolition of the overnighter has been taking place, and that should be completed by the end of the year. Preservation of the old motel signs for salvage or potential reuse and incorporation into the project. We've updated the purchase and sale agreement with Brinshore to allow for an additional LIHTC application round in 2021, as the project did not receive 9% credits in 2019 or 2020. And we're currently in the developer due diligence period. For project financing, in addition to the 6.4 committed in RDA Affordable Housing Funds, Brinshore is developing an extensive capital stack to secure funding for the project, and they've recently received 9% credits, which is great, and they're currently applying for 4% LIHTC. And the unit mix plays a very important role in how the developer can maximize that LIHTC equity. Next slide, please. So as was previously mentioned by Allison, the board passed a resolution in 2017, and the RFP was issued accordingly that the property will not include more than 50% affordable units. As such, Brinshore has identified an effective unit mix for the project, which 1, meets the board goals, 2, allows the project to maximize LIHTC equity and therefore reduce the financing gap, and 3, preserves affordability into the future as the North Temple project area continues to grow. Also, it's anticipated that roughly 30% of the units will be family size units at 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. The table on the right summarizes the housing mix and provides an overview of the income levels that will be served by the project and who can live there. So for example, that first row shows a single parent working part-time at a coffee shop would be able to afford a unit at 20% AMI. Finally, as the development is further refined, the unit mix may vary slightly as some flexibility is required to make the project pencil as we move through the many moving pieces that are still to be figured out, but it will maintain a minimum of 50% of the units at 70% AMI or above as required. Next slide, please. And to further elaborate on the unit mix with visuals, as I'm a very visual person, on the left is a pie chart of the unit breakdown with 70 to 80% units accounting for 50% of the unit mix in gray. Due to the naturally occurring lower rents in the North Temple area, 70 to 80% AMI units are actually above market range, which is what can be seen in the table on the right in some examples. So this unit mix, in utilizing the 70 and 80% AMI, allows for the project to meet the board's goals of 50% market rate units, as they're above market rate for the area, while also maximizing LIHTC equity and preserving affordability into the future. Next slide, please. And ensuring affordability over the long term may be more important now than ever. While some affordable units are coming online in the area, there's also a very significant increase in the number of market rate units in the North Temple area. And market rate units and rental pricing is expected to continue to increase as it is across the rest of the city. The map's a little small here, but it is available in your RDA packet as an attachment, or excuse me, RDA memo and board packet. And next slide, please. Finally, our next administrative steps administrative steps will include that once 4% LIHTC awards are determined, we will work with Brinshaw to further refine the financing structure. We'll identify any estimated remaining gap on the project and evaluate land disposition options. And we'll return to the board at a future date with the land disposition options and a related cost benefit analysis for discussion with the board. Next slide. That's the presentation, and we'd like to open it up to questions. We also have representatives from Brinshaw here, including Brinshaw Principal David Brent, Senior VP Whitney Weller, and Associate Development Manager Carly Brindley. I can't see everyone who joined, but I believe all three are with us, and I know Whitney is for sure if you have questions for them directly.
Yes, Madam Chair, so far, oops, sorry,
ahead.
we have Whitney Weller with us so far. I believe the others are in the process of getting in, just for your information.
Well, do you, board members, do you guys have questions, comments? I don't see. I do. I have two questions, so I can start, and then if anybody else would like to. So I have a question about the disposition of the land. So, or maybe, Corinne, if you can give us like a brief history of how we participated, and then we need to dispose of it at some point. And then the second question was, there might be a potential additional ask for the gap in the finance. So if you can, I don't remember how these all came to be, or
Sure.
what was approved. Okay, go ahead.
So for the gap, we aren't sure yet if there will be one or to what size that would be, but that's the importance of the unit mix that we're utilizing, because it will make sure that the gap is as low as possible. Basically, by utilizing the unit mix that we have, we won't be leaving any LIHTC equity on the table. So that's our first step. Make sure we can get as much LIHTC as possible for the project, so that we're not having to fund that gap, and also preserve that affordability into the future. And then at that point, we'll know a little bit more about what the gap may be. And also, Brinshaw is really leaving no stone unturned. They're utilizing a lot of different funds. There's some examples in the memo of the capital stack so far, such as they're applying for Olin Walker, county funds, etc. So we're not sure what the gap may be yet, but we would have more information after we find out if they receive the 4% LIHTC credits. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So,
Okay.
and the other, sorry, but the follow-up is, at some point when we decided to participate in this project, we said, okay, we're going to help you with the land acquisition, and at some point we're going to dispose of it, and in exchange of something, which is the benefits in this case. And then we also said, if there's any gap in the future, we'll also take a look at it, and we might be able to participate.
So for the land disposition, that's been on the table from the beginning, and it's modeled similarly to what we just did with the project on 255 South State. So basically, the land disposition would be a key piece of this being affordable, especially considering the large extent of public benefits we're asking for. So it's on the table as an example from a previous project, and we would come back with kind of the cost benefit of what that could look like. Doing the land note on and disposing of the property to the developer, also options for not, and what those returns may or may not be for the RDA for the board to consider.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? See, people are raising their hands. Corinne. Right. So, Corinne, do you need anything from us? Like, is this just informational at this point? Okay.
Yes,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Unless Brinshaw would like to say something, add to any of this. If not, we can move on.
Hi, this is Whitney. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't know if you, oh, you can't see me. Okay, hold on. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
It's been a while since we've seen a lot of you, so I just wanted to have a chance to say hello. We are very excited to be back in front of you with Spark. And knowing that we already have 9% credits, but now having applied for the 4% credits and the bonds, which we'll hear about next month. So excited to be moving forward on this second project with this amazing team. And Corinne and Tammy have been extremely helpful in getting us to this point. So just wanted to thank them and to thank all of you for hearing us today and, you know, hearing us when we come back with more specifics. But as you can imagine that, you know, with COVID, the reason that there may still be some changes and we're working on the budget is a lot really due to COVID and our construction costs. So hopefully things will continue to settle down in the industry and we can come back to you with some very solid information in the next round.
Great. Thank you. We looking forward for this project, at least me personally, to be completed. So I can't wait.
Great, great. Us too. It's actually my favorite.
Right. Okay,
So
well, good
thank
luck to
you.
you, and we'll see you soon.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
No problem. We're moving on to item number 10, which is the informational as well, and then North Temple implementation plans. And at the table we have Tammy Hansaker and then Kara Lindsley, both from the RDA. Go ahead, ladies.
Thank you. I will turn it over to Kara, but first say that this is the first in a series of implementation plans that you will be seeing. And the RDA staff really views these implementation plans as living documents to change and evolve over time based on opportunities and budget allocations and whatnot. But in general, they outline the general goals and objectives that we have for the project area over the next 3 to 5 years. So it's a shorter term plan that's more specific than our longer term, broader project area plans. So this is the first one that we're doing, which is North Temple, and I will turn it over to Kara.
Great, thanks, Tammy. And thanks, Taylor, for pulling up the presentation. If we could go to the next slide, that'd be great. So as Tammy mentioned, the RDA is in the process of developing work plans for each of our project areas to focus our efforts over the next 3 to 5 years. And these plans identify both specific objectives for the project areas, and those objectives we created to try to incorporate the goals of the city, the RDA, and the community. And then also we'll discuss priority projects for the project area. And those priority projects identified in the plan will guide the development of the RDA's annual funding request that we bring to the board each year. And like Tammy mentioned, our intent today is to start with the North Temple project area and hear any feedback the board might have on the plan with the goal of ensuring that the administration and the board have a common understanding of the priorities and objectives for the project area. So if we could go to the next slide. This map just shows the RDA's active project areas. North Temple is shown in light blue at the top left. And the next slide shows the North Temple project area specifically and its boundaries, which encompass the area generally from Redwood Road to I-15 and then about 2nd or 3rd North down to about South Temple or 1st South. Next slide. So I wanted to go through each of the objectives that we've drafted for this implementation plan because like I mentioned, our goal today is to make sure the administration and the board have a common understanding of these objectives. And so there are a lot of words, but I thought it was worth taking the time to go through each one of these. So the first objective for North Temple is to incentivize redevelopment along the North Temple corridor that incorporates the principles of sustainable, equitable, transit-oriented development and enhances transit station areas as lively, walkable, people-oriented places. Facilitate the inclusion of ground floor commercial space and development projects that is affordable and available to small local community serving businesses. Next slide. Provide a mix of housing typologies with missing middle housing types used as a buffer between higher density in the transit corridor and single family residential neighborhoods. Focus housing resources on developing and preserving rental and ownership products that create and support an income diverse neighborhood. Next slide. Create an extension of City Creek Corridor from 800 West to the Jordan River, providing opportunities for new development around the public Folsom Trail. Create and renovate open spaces for the community that are safe, vibrant, and useful, and that complement neighboring developments. Facilitate strategic interventions to address properties that are characterized by high crime rates and negatively impact neighborhood livability. And then finally, next slide, improve environmental conditions in the North Temple project area by facilitating new development and adaptive reuse on environmentally challenged properties. So if we can go to the next slide. Great. The project area implementation plans also include a summary and projections of the project area budget. So I just wanted to show what's included in the North Temple plan. We start with the current year and the actual revenue that the RDA received for the project area. So on this chart, that's the $633,000 for last fiscal year. And from there, for North Temple, we dedicate 10% to administrative costs, which is shown in the fourth row down, and 20% to housing. Once we take those two allocations out, then 10% of what's remaining is dedicated to the North Temple school safety and infrastructure improvements. And so that's how the bottom row is calculated, which is our non-obligated fund estimate. So you can see for fiscal year 21, the amount that was available for future projects and programs was around $400,000. So projecting this out into the future by anticipating a 25% increase in the RDA's revenue each year, the bottom row shows approximately how much funding we anticipate having available for future projects and programs in the North Temple project area. Okay, next slide. The RDA currently holds one asset in the North Temple project area. This is another section that will be in each implementation plan. It's the Overnighter Motel at 1500 West North Temple. In the previous agenda item, you heard quite a bit about the Spark project that's planned for this property, so I probably don't need to repeat that information. But just wanted to reiterate that the RDA purchased the property and selected Brinshore Development to bring a new model of transit-oriented development to the neighborhood. Next slide. Our implementation plans also identify the RDA's programs that are especially applicable to the RDA's objectives in each project area. So those are listed here. In addition to the RDA's tools of acquiring and disposing of property and providing loans for housing development, I just wanted to point out that we've also listed 4 of the proposed new programs that were discussed today during Ashley's presentation. And we believe these could be used to meet the RDA's and community's goals for North Temple. And those are the Affordable Storefront Activation Program, the Adaptive Reuse Loan Program, which could be expanded to include North Temple, Commercial Revitalization Loan Program, and the Community and Cultural Initiatives Program. Next slide. So finally, each project area implementation plan will identify priority projects on short-term, midterm, and long-term basis. And for North Temple, I was going to go through what's included in our plan. I also wanted to mention that this list of priority projects was developed following outreach activities that the RDA conducted in 2019, when we brought various potential projects to the community and to the RDA board. And so we prioritized these projects based on the input we received from those groups. So for short term, we have the Folsom Trail, which is shown here. This photo was taken last week. So this is not the final product, but I thought it would be interesting to see the current progress on the trail. It's a pedestrian and bicycle path that currently extends from 10th West and will go all the way to the front runner station at the North Temple Viaduct. And the RDA contributed $350,000 to the total project cost on this, which was around $3.8 million. And the RDA's funds were intended to supplement landscape, lighting, and amenities in the design. Another short-term project we have is the City Creek daylighting design, which was mentioned earlier. Oh, sorry, Taylor, can we go back before we move on? I just wanted to mention the City Creek daylighting design was mentioned earlier in the budget amendment, but the RDA is requesting the use of some of our North Temple project area funds to match approximately $100,000 that the Seven Canyons Trust raised for implementing the recommendations of the City Creek daylighting feasibility study that was completed last year. Okay, now next slide. We can move on to midterm projects. These are not funded projects, but projects that were identified during our community outreach as important and priorities for the board and the community. And they include acquiring a property in the project area to facilitate strategic redevelopment along the North Temple corridor, facilitating temporary and interim uses of city property in Folsom corridor to activate it and to provide amenities for trail users. And then also collaborating with North Temple stakeholders to identify, plan, and execute a community-driven public art project that celebrates the neighborhood's character and identity. And the photo here is shown from the Arbutus Trail in Vancouver, which is a trail very similar to what we hope the Folsom Trail will become, and had some great public art along the trail. And then finally, long-term projects, we could go to the next slide, that have been identified in North Temple include facilitating the redevelopment of State Fair Park in accordance with the master plan that's currently being developed. This is an image from the master plan, and wanted to point out that it's conceptual and may differ, but these are the ideas that are coming out of that effort right now. And also facilitate the redevelopment of other large and strategic properties in the North Temple corridor in a way that's consistent with the RDA's goals. And I think that might be my last slide. Is that right? Oh, well, okay. Actually, I just wanted to mention each implementation plan will also include a section to describe the projects that RDA has completed in the project area. So that list for North Temple is shown here. Okay, now that's my last slide. And just wanted to open it up for questions or feedback on the plans.
Thanks, Kara. Board members, do you have questions? Concerns? Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'll just make a quick comment that I really appreciate the work that Kara's put into this over the last few years and how accessible she's been in coordinating, communicating, collaborating with the community on all this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? So Kara, just quick information about the Fair Park. How is that going again, and do they have a timeline for their master plan? I missed that slide.
I don't know what the timeline is in terms of completing the master plan, but I know the master plan includes projects on various timelines in the order in which they will be redeveloping portions of the Fair Park, and some of them are as soon as in the next year. And some of them extend out to, I think, 15-year horizon. So I'm probably not the best person to speak to the content of the master plan, but I think it will be completed shortly.
Okay. And what about the international market?
That is, I know that's one of their short-term goals for the Fair Park, and that they're moving forward with some of the changes that need to be made to the Fair Park to make that happen, but I have not heard the latest on when that might begin.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Anybody else? Go ahead, James.
Madam Chair, my suggestion would be that maybe we invite Larry Melanix from the Fair Park to come talk about the master plan and also about the international market. Have him come present to the RDA.
All right, we can do that. Okay, I'll initiate that. I'll send him an email and see, and I will talk to staff about when this could happen, depending on our agenda. Thank you. Good suggestion. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. All right, Kara, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Back to the agenda. We are on item 11, report and announcements from the executive director.
I just wanted to congratulate RDA staff on an awesome meeting. A lot of proactive and I think really tangible evidence of the city's effort to move equity into the hub of the wheel of government in the way that we operate in perpetuity. And I'm really proud of the work that that we, I think, as the board and myself, and then all of the staff in all of the offices are doing together to make this happen. So it was a really positive, happy RDA meeting, and all of this work I'm looking forward to us finalizing and starting to work through in the coming quarters. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. We're at item number 12, report and announcements from RDA staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We don't have any specific updates on projects. Just wanted to echo what the mayor said and thank both you, the mayor, and the board for your comments today. For staff, today's items represent a lot of work the staff has put into it, and the coming items in future meetings do that as well. And so on behalf of Tammy and the rest of staff, thank you very much. We're excited to move these projects and initiatives forward. Also, thank you to you as a board for the extra time today. We know that you have a stacked agenda always on the city council side, so I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to have enough time to work through all of these items, and specifically thank you to council staff. I know this goes without saying for you as council members and board members, but I don't think we say it enough that they really helped us a lot putting this together and providing the opportunity to do this. So wanted to recognize their efforts as well. So unless there are any questions, that's all we have. Thank you for the direction today and appreciate it.
Thank you, Danny. This has been one of those meetings. I agree with the mayor / executive director in this meeting that this has been a really positive one. Lots of work, and one meeting where I feel like, holy cow, we do a lot and we are like on track on a lot of things that we keep discussing, and it's really at the forefront of the community and things that, you know, we've talked for many years and now it's actually happening. So, and in all of them we're being proactive. So I'm super proud of the work that you guys are doing. So thank you. We are going to move on to, we don't have any written briefings. Hold on, written briefings, and then consent items.
Madam Chair, you just need a motion to approve the consent agenda to set that date.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
So was that a motion by James?
No, it was,
No, by Chris.
Yes.
Chris, and seconded by Director Dugan. I'm going to roll call this. James?
Yes.
Dennis Ferris,
Yes.
Chris Wharton,
Yes.
Mano,
Yes.
Fowler. It's absent, sorry, Dugan,
Yes.
and me, I'm a yes. So that passes. And I would need a motion for a closed session for strategy sessions to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property and advice of counsel.
Madam Chair, I move that we go into closed session for the purpose of discussing proper real estate strategy and to receive the advice of counsel.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Director Wharton and a second by Director Ferris. I'm going to roll call this. Rogers,
Yes.
Ferris,
Yes.
Wharton,
Yes.
Mano,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
Fowler is absent, and I'm a yes. So we are going into closed session. A friendly reminder to everyone to be sure they're in a closed area in a room by themselves during the closed session.
And Madam Chair, we are staying in this link for the closed session. So if you could just give a couple of minutes so that we can make sure that the right people are here and the right people are not. All members of the public can leave, and then we would ask that only city staff remain. We can double check that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to spout off who we need to keep for staff or.